Christopher Wallace, Notorious B.I.G, Biggie Smalls.
No.
All three of these guys were killed on the same night.
A triple murder.
Notorious B.I.G was born, like I said, Christopher Wallace in Brooklyn in May of 1972 in the Bedford-Stuyvesant neighborhood.
Bed-Stuy, as we call it.
Okay, well, whatever. That's where the block party and Dave Chappelle's block party is filmed.
The titular block party.
Yeah, thank you. The titular. Wallace's childhood was whatever the polite term for opposite of glamorous is. He was
ultra glamorous, glam rock.
Keep going up.
Regal, R.F. Kennedy-esque.
He was surrounded by drug dealers, drug addicts, and drugs. By 15, he was dealing crack in the neighborhood, and by 17, he was arrested for selling it. He spent 9 months in a prison in North Carolina before making bail. Upon his release, he started to gravitate towards music and gave dealing drugs up for rapping, which is the dream of inner city youth. He began making homemade demo tapes. One of these demos landed in the hands of a well-known DJ going by the name Mr. C, who went and featured Biggie in the magazine.
Richie Cunningham's dad?
Yeah, Richie Cunningham. They were in the music industry. That's how they had the jukeboxes.
The Cunninghams discovered Notorious B.I.G.
Yeah, and then he went on to be the Big Bopper. B.I.G. Bopper.
The Notorious Big Bopper. Hello, baby.
Hello, Big Bopper. Anyways, Mr. C put him in The Source, and he started to get noticed after that. The write-up and one of those demo tapes made its way to the A&R chief at Uptown Records named Sean Combs. Or as we know him now, Puff Daddy. Puffy. Diddy. Combs was leaving Uptown Records to start his own label, the annoyingly titled Bad Boy Entertainment, and he brought
What you gonna do when they entertain you?
Change the radio is what I'm gonna do. Brought the talented young Wallace, who was going by the name Notorious B.I.G, along with him. He was going by Biggie Smalls before that, but it turned out there was another rapper had previously trademarked the same name, so he started going by Notorious B.I.G. But I'm gonna use I'm gonna use the three names interchangeably just to not get it stale.
You're talking about that obscure guy now, right?
Yeah.
He was the one murdered?
Yeah, the guy who no one ever heard about again. Both names fit as he was a large gentleman, B.I.G, Biggie. At the time of his death, the autopsy report measured him at 6'1", weighing 395 pounds.
Oh my God.
Every article I read made a point to specify his weight, which is pretty awful. I always feel a little guilty, like, oh, stop. You don't need to...
remember he was 395 pounds, and then he was shot in all 395 pounds.
Notorious B.I.G. was pretty much responsible for making Bad Boy Entertainment one of the most successful rap and R&B labels of the 90s. He released Ready to Die in 94, and it went up to number 3 in the R&B album chart and spawned several hits. Juicy, which ended up on number 27 on the pop charts, 14 on R&B charts in 1994. Big Papa, which we all remember, went to number 6 on the pop charts, 4 on the R&B charts in 1995. And One More Chance / Stay With Me went to number 2 on the pop charts and number 1 on the R&B charts in 1995. In doing my readings, I found that several people still refer to him as one of the greatest rappers, if not the greatest rappers of our time.
Have they heard Macklemore?
Have they heard Justin Bieber yet?
The new and improved.
New and improved. While Wallace and Combs were putting all this together and building a career together, B.I.G. became friends with a well-known fiery young rapper named Tupac Shakur, who at the time was living in New York. Shakur really liked Biggie at the time and really supported him. He let him open up for his shows. They would sometimes rap together. Whenever he did interviews, he would mention Biggie's name. He was really trying to get his friend to get noticed. Now, Tupac was signed to Death Row Records, which was run by Marion Hugh Suge Knight, which is super scary.
Also a character from past episode.
Yeah, he was also in the Rampart. The Bad Cop is heavily tied with my research. Death Row was another record company that was booming in the 90s. It was a top rap label in the music industry. At its peak, it was making $100 million a year, and along with Tupac, it had Snoop Dogg. They were like the face of West Coast rap, pretty much.
The jester of the three.
He wasn't at the time. But things start to go sour in 1994. Shortly after B.I.G. released Ready to Die, things began to get sour between the two parties. Suge and Shakur on one end, and Biggie and Puff Daddy on the other end.
Puff Daddy?
The East Coast-West Coast rivalry had been going on for years already, but now like it was becoming famous because the two faces of the opposite ends are now like the biggest rappers of the time. So it goes like this. Tupac was hanging around with mutual friends of his and Biggie's who were gangsters.
No.
Come on. The gangsters were drug dealers trying to get big... Sorry. It's hard to tell if I'm talking about Big or B.I.G.
They were trying to make it B.I.G.
The gangsters were drug dealers trying to make it big in the music industry, and they wanted to sign Tupac. According to him, they already had Puff Daddy in their pocket, who Tupac saw as a sniveling, unloyal weasel, and he wanted nothing to do with him. So it's November of 1994, and Tupac had been repeatedly and annoyingly asked by another mutual friend, Annie Walker, or Stretch as they called him, to record a song with one of Biggie's friends at the Quad recording studio in Manhattan. Now, he's reluctant, but he eventually agrees, because every time he asks, they promise him more and more money. So him and Stretch are in the elevator to go up, and according to Tupac, Stretch drops himself to the ground, and 2 masked gunmen step into the elevator and shoot Tupac 5 times at boink
range.
And shoot him at point blank range. 2 of those bullets strike Tupac in the head.
I'm thinking that's a big boink.
He really got boinked in that elevator. He gets shot twice in the head in this elevator, and he survives.
Wow.
He managed
to Paul Schrade.
He's like Paul Schrade.
He's the Paul Schrade of his generation.
So he managed to go up a few floors to the recording stool, crawls over to the room to find Biggie and Puff Daddy
and
there.
Cuts the sickest track.
Let it roll. He crawls into the room, and according to Tupac, Biggie and Puff Daddy are, his words, amazed that he survived, which is a phrase. It's like, what were you thinking? Tupac's words show his suspicions that he believes that he was lured there, but almost everyone there agreed on one thing. He was shot in the head. His understanding of the situation may be a little bit off. Even Stretch claims he never dropped himself to the ground and that Tupac was remembering it wrong. Again, you've been shot in the head. But that only makes paranoid people more paranoid, and he blamed Puff Daddy and Biggie for the attack. And it doesn't help that right after that, Biggie released a song called Who Shot Ya on his Ready to Die album. The song doesn't necessarily call Tupac out or make any direct connections, but that doesn't mean that Tupac won't take it personally. Both Biggie and Puff Daddy try to explain that the song depicts something that happened before Tupac's attack, but that just won't convince him. But maybe Tupac's right about all this. So Tupac puts out a song called Hit 'Em Up, which does not tiptoe around the calling people out thing. And boy, does he call people out. He says Puff Daddy, he says Biggie, he says all these other people. He also, in the song, claims to be sleeping with Wallace's wife, Faith Evans, which makes it super personal. Now, this isn't the podcast where we recite rap lyrics all willy-nilly.
Isn't it?
Can it be now? We'll post songs up if you want to listen to them. So the two become bitter rivals after that and began feuding at events. The rivalry grew from not only the two central figures who were Tupac and Biggie, but also their record labels. Now Death Row Records and Bad Boy Entertainment were going at it too. It led to assaults, drive-by shootings. When stuff started heating up, a bodyguard once pulled a weapon during a scuffle with one of Shakur's entourage at the Shrine Auditorium. It should also be noted that both labels were using gang members for security. The Bloods were protecting Death Row Records, which makes sense seeing as Suge Knight himself is a Blood, and Southside Crips were protecting Biggie when he came to the West Coast. So at this time,
they didn't do a good job.
So at this point, Biggie records a song called Long Kiss Goodnight, which in his style is veiled callouts, classy move. After it was recorded, but before it was released, Tupac is gunned down in Las Vegas after attending the Tyson fight.
Is that where it happened?
Yeah, in Las Vegas. In the car right next to him is Suge Knight. I don't know if he got shot or not. Now here's where some of the speculations start, which will turn into a big tangled mess later on. Southside Crips were watching over Biggie when he was here in LA. Suge Knight, who was in the car with Tupac when it was shot, claims to have spotted one of the guys in the car who was a member of the Southside Crips named Dwayne Keith Davis. He went by Keefy D, a caller of shots, if you will. Keefy D's nephew, Orlando Anderson, another Southside Crip, was for a long time the #1 suspect in Tupac's murder. The day after Tupac's murder, a huge brawl broke out in Compton between Suge Knight's entourage and Keefy D's gang entourage. Now, Suge Knight ended up going to a jail on a probation violation stemming from the beating of Orlando Anderson at the MGM Grand Hotel that was caught on tape just before the car attack. So basically, before they get shot up, Suge Knight is already beating up Orlando Anderson, which could instigate it. That's kind of what foggies it up from it being a hit, or if it's just like direct retaliation or not. In 1998, Orlando Anderson was shot and killed at a car wash on Oleander and Alondra Boulevard near Compton High School. But back to Biggie. That's everything with Suge and Southside Crips and Tupac. So it's 6 months later. Wallace is walking with a cane after a car accident that him and another rapper named Little Cease were in together. He was permanently injured from that. Yeah, you might remember his cane from music videos. He's like standing with a lean and a big coat.
Are you thinking of Ebenezer Scrooge?
I might be thinking of Old Man Scrooge.
Scroogey Smalls? Scroogey Rouge?
Stop right now. It's out of hand. His new album was almost finished, and it would be called Life After Death. Yikes. Remember last album title, Ready to Die? Double yikes. He was quoted as saying in an interview, "There's nothing that protects you from the inevitable. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen no matter what you do."
Sounds a lot like RFK.
It does sound like RFK. So in March of 1997, he was in LA to put the finishing touches on his album. He was also in town to attend the Soul Train Music Awards and other parties. On the 9th of March, Quincy Jones, the producer, not the famous comedian, was having a music industry party at the Peterson Automotive Museum on Museum Row across from LACMA at Fairfax and Wilshire. It's the building that looks like Bad Vibrations. Both these attacks happened on Wilshire is something I thought.
Yeah. The cursed street.
Cursed Wilshire. Around 12:30 a.m., Biggie leaves the party.
Triumph of the Wilshire. Episode title in the future.
So it's 12:30 a.m. Biggie leaves the party with his entourage of 6, and they get into a GMC Suburban. They sat at the red light on Fairfax and Wilshire.
Facing what direction?
I think they were going up Fairfax, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I
By
believe.
up, you mean north?
North.
Towards the Grove. They were going to the American Girl store.
Yeah, they were going to go to the Chipotle there. They were going to go to Farmer's Market and buy asparagus.
They wanted to see what the fuss was about with the hot sauce shop. He wanted to try wet butt.
He wanted to get cupcakes for his dog. They did not.
Well, I still have a few more. He wanted to get a $5 ice cream cone. He wanted to get an $8 donut. He wanted to try a mango. Well, I could keep going. He wanted to ride the trolley at the
I'm going to keep going. Biggie
wanted to get an autograph from Dwight Schrute.
He wanted to ride the trolley that goes around the Grove.
Didn't I just say that?
Did you? I wasn't saying.
I think I just said that.
I
apparently wasn't paying attention. I don't remember either.
Yeah, I was red with anger.
He wanted to ride the trolley around the Grove.
Biggie wanted to ride the trolley. Oh, I wrote that down.
That's all I have.
So they're sitting at the red light, Fairfax and Wilshire. I don't know what direction they're going in. Biggie's in the passenger seat.
It's got to be north.
It has to be north.
I mean, because if they're going south, they would be on the other side of the street. They would be at Johnny's fake coffee shop. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah. They would have to be going up north to be sitting there because they left the Peterson Museum. Mm-hmm. They could be going down Wilshire.
It sounds like you said that in a trance. Maybe you've been hypno-programmed to teach all this to me.
Going down Wilshire, going down Wilshire, going down Wilshire, going down Wilshire.
Ma, get rid of my journals.
Burn my room.
Take the dog out. Burn the room. Leave the cannolis.
Stop letting me read Catcher in the Rye. Passenger seat, Fairfax and Wilshire, red light, 12:30 a.m., March 9th. Los Angeles.
At the same time.
A dark Impala pulled up to the passenger side of the Suburban that was sitting at the red light.
The feline predator?
Like the feline, yeah, exactly.
Enter the Impala.
The name of the episode. The killer pulled up next to him and fired 7 times. Biggie was hit by 4 bullets, but only the last bullet fired was the one that ensured a fatality. It entered his right hip, passed through his heart, liver, and colon, and made its way to his left shoulder, so it shot up.
How did that happen?
Lower car, higher.
Okay.
Impala's lower, Gypsy's higher.
So it went through the door?
Get this.
Okay.
Pay attention now.
All right.
The bullets from...
I've been reading too many Kennedy autopsy reports.
How fast did the bullets go? The bullets were from a 9mm handgun. They were actually pretty rare bullets. 9mm Gecko bullets, metal-piercing German ammunition.
Whoa.
Note that.
They knew what they were doing.
Note that. He was taken to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center and declared dead at 1:15 a.m.
Oh my God. Well, wait a minute. What time was RFK pronounced?
I think 1:23.
Keep going. I'm going to shuffle some papers.
His body was identified by his ex-wife Faith Evans and his mother Folletta.
1:44 a.m.
Wow. In his pocket at the time of death, 1 bag of weed, 1 asthma inhaler, and 3 Magnum condoms.
Oh.
He had a good night planned, and it was ruined by him getting killed. There were witnesses to his assault because
he was going to inflate the condoms with the inhaler and smoke weed out of it,
which was hip at the time.
On the trolley at the Grove.
Wondering how to open a mango. There were witnesses to his assault because the party at the museum had a line of people outside, and as well, people were leaving the party. I've read dozens, I've read hundreds, but either way, police had a hard time at first finding any witnesses willing to speak up. There were a lot of claims that witnesses were too scared to testify, but eventually witnesses started to come forward. Now, according to the witnesses, Biggie's killer was an African-American male wearing a blue suit and a bow tie. Pee Wee Herman? Black Pee Wee Herman?
Black Pee Wee Herman.
So right away, strangely...
He kept asking about his missing bike.
If you love murder so much, why don't you marry it? So right away, cops started suspecting gang affiliation because of the Tupac murder. They started linking the two up.
Guy in a blue suit and a white bow tie, gotta be a gang member, because he's black.
So they were baffled by this. Really, it could be gang related. It could have ties to something bigger. There was rumors that Biggie had affiliation with the Genovese family and the mafia in New York. It just could be a random killing. Who knows? But a bow tie threw a lot.
Like that.
Not with bullets like that. Bow tie threw everybody off though. Russ Moan, spokesperson for LAPD, was saying, "We're drawing no conclusions about the bow tie," which is a funny sentence. Which is a funny sentence out of context. But this was in response to someone bringing up the fact that the shooter may have been affiliated with a Nation of Islam, many of whom wear a signature bow tie.
That's true.
Others suggested the suit and bow tie would indicate that the killer had attended a party, for example, the Vibe party that was going on that same night.
Mm-hmm. Or he was a magician.
He could have been a magician, and the bow tie was spinny.
Yeah.
Did they ask
squirting water?
Was it squirting water or possibly spinny?
Was it squirting metal-piercing bullets?
So let's get into the long list of suspects and conspiracy theories. Some people believe that the Southside Crips were to blame for the killing. But Greg, weren't they set up to protect Biggie in L.A.?
Weren't they the ones who supposedly killed Tupac? I'm not repeating that.
Why would they kill Biggie? Well, according to a member of the Crips, Wallace had promised to pay them $1 million to kill Tupac, but Wallace and his people only paid $50,000 and never paid the rest of their fee, which would give them more than enough reason to kill Biggie.
950,000 reasons to kill him.
One of the reasons for their suspicions was a few months after Biggie was killed, LAPD seized a black Chevy Impala from the backyard of Keefe D, the man who supposedly was linked to Tupac's murder.
So it's a gangster car because it's a black Chevy Impala.
LAPD, give it up!
Did the Impala have a bow tie on too?
Bow tie belt running the engine. There are several members of the Bloods who many believe killed Biggie. One of the most suspected is a man named Wardell Faust, a.k.a. Darnell Bolton, a.k.a. Poochie. A member of
Poochie.
Why Poochie? Why? A member of the mob hero Bloods.
The Bloods.
The
Dracula Bloods.
LA Bloods confused the hell out of Nosferatu when he showed up. But I thought, no, never mind.
How did they never do Blackula and Compton? And he's like, where are the Bloods?
That would be really funny.
That would be funny.
I wouldn't let you write it though.
Oh, come on.
Oh, why? I understand. You don't.
Hey, no one steal that idea, okay? Because we will kill you. We will hire all the Bloods and the Crips to find you and kill you.
We will Nosferatu kill you.
And him.
Yeah, and also Nosferatu.
We're going to dig up Bela Lugosi and make him kill you.
Reggie Wright Jr., who was the head of Death Row Security, said that Suge Knight and Poochie had a very secretive, exclusive relationship. A former investigator of the LAPD named Greg Kading was in charge of the special task force investigating Wallace's murder. He was on assignment for 3 years, from 2006 to 2009, after which point he left the force because he felt scrutinized for looking into it. The task force was assembled at the point when Biggie's mom, Voletta, and some other family members filed a suit against the city of LA and LAPD, but we'll get into that later. Back to Poochie. So it's 2009, and because of the lawsuit, the LAPD is looking into the case. Kading started to look for weak links in Suge Knight's circle of people and came up with an old girlfriend of his, Teresa Swan. She claims that in February of 1997,
familiar.
I think you might have brought her up before.
Yeah.
She claims that in February of 97, a month before Wallace was...
Listen to Bad Cop.
Please, God, listen to Bad Cop, and then get back to us. A month before B.I.G. was killed, Suge Knight approached Poochie to kill Boogie at Weird Ends. Wardell, Poochie Faust...
Poochie, kill Boogie.
If Poochie's alive, he's gonna hurt me. He claimed that Wardell Poochie Faust to kill Biggie after Suge suspected that Biggie has solicited Keefe D to do them in. And for this fee for taking out Biggie, $13,000.
What?
Teresa says that the arrangements were made and she carried $9,000 on her with the promise to pay another $4,000 after the job was complete. She handed the money off to Poochie at the Peterson Automotive Museum, which she attended. I'm pretty sure he was not there. He might have just been close. Swan also said that Poochie drove an aqua green Chevy Impala.
That's not black though.
Dark Knight. My favorite movie, Dark Knight. Same car, make, model, but less dark as obviously stated, but it was midnight.
That's true.
Yeah.
Everything's black at midnight.
Blackula.
Welcome to Blackula and Compton.
King said that while he was wrapping up his investigation, he was dismissed from the case. Although, yes, he did get confessions. Internal Affairs was looking into Kading as he allegedly was making false statements on an affidavit for a separate case. They eventually found nothing on that, but around the same time, the Wallace family had to drop their lawsuit against the city of LA and LAPD, but again, we'll get into that later. This was all Kading stuff. Poochie was killed in the Compton drive-by in 2003, and
Kading was euthanized.
And Kading quit the force and wrote a book about his findings called...
Put down, is what I meant.
He was put down. Kading quit the force and wrote a book about the findings called Murder Rap, the untold story of Biggie Smalls and the Tupac Shakur murder investigations. As we're going to learn, a lot of books being written. The biggest allegation, and honestly the one that makes the most sense to me, is that LAPD's Rampart Division, the ones who may have been involved with Kennedy assassination, along with Suge Knight, conspired together to kill Biggie Smalls, possibly with another man named Amir Muhammad, born Harry Billups, a real estate broker.
I never suspect the real estate broker. But we talked about that in the Bad Cop, Bad Cop.
Yeah, you brought up...
In particular, not just any cops, but what was his name again?
Rafael Perez and David Mack.
Yeah.
Please go back and listen to that. If you want to hear the Rampart story, this is this specifically, though.
This is a nice little teaser. It's a poo-poo platter for you.
Poo-poo platter. Like I said, one of those people involved in the Rampart thing, heavily involved in this, David Mack. Now, at the time of the murder, one of the junior investigators in the robbery homicide division was assigned to the case. His name was Russell Poole. Now, Kadings and Poole were both ex-LAPD.
That name's really familiar, too.
Doesn't it? Isn't it familiar? I don't know. He was...
I think he's also involved in... Did we mention listen to the Rampart Bad Cop, Bad Cop?
I think that he's like a whistleblower. He's a whistleblower, though.
Yeah.
I think he might be like not bad Rampart. Ethan Hawke. I don't know. if you get that reference.
I wish I didn't.
Now, Kadings and Poole were both ex-LAPD who wrote books about the murders of Tupac and Biggie, but their big point of difference is that Poole believes the LAPD worked with Suge Knight to kill Wallace. Kading feels the LAPD is not involved, that Suge Knight pulled this off with Poochie. That's just to clarify. And also, Poole's book is called Labyrinth. LA is capitalized. Just want to clarify. All right, I just want to listen to this. I want to send everybody out there. Babes in the Wilderness. What's the Babes in the...
Babes in the Wilderness.
Babes in the Wilderness,
Babes in Pigland.
Let's get back to Rampart. So it's 1997. Perez was convicted of robbing the Bank of America for $722,000 while still being employed by the Los Angeles Police Department to protect and serve. This is when Poole's suspicions about Mac's involvement grew, because it seemed well known to most that Mac protected Death Row Records and claimed association with the mob Piro Bloods. Him and Knight both grew up in Compton, and his ties to the Bloods is deep. After he was arrested, he denounced his, quotations, career as a cop and claimed to be full gang member, boasting about gunning people down. He arranged the hit on his former lover, who helped with a bank robbery, who might have been Teresa Swan. When they arrested Mac for the robbery, here we go. This is what they find. Black 7th generation Chevy Impala SS parked in his garage. Also in his garage, a shrine dedicated to Tupac Shakur. Poster, memorabilia, the like.
What?
Also found on Mac's property, the very rare 9mm Gecko bullets used to kill Notorious B.I.G. Some believe that it was Mac himself who pulled up to the Chevy Impala on March 9th and shot Biggie. Damian Butler, who was in Biggie's car, pointed Mac out of a phono lineup in April of 1998. Mac's work schedule was also under scrutiny during the period of his life where he was robbing banks and possibly shooting famous rappers. In both instances, Mac had taken the days before and after off. But there's another name that has been presented, Amir Muhammad, like I said, Harry Billups, but a very odd suspect. Now, David Mack and Billups met at the University of Oregon and became good friends. Billups is the godfather to Mac's son. Suspicions grew when, in December of 1997, Muhammad came to visit Mac in prison. The LAPD was watching very closely all connections to Mac and seeing what other corruption cases they might have led to. And I believe they started to look into Muhammad as a suspect after the bow tie was presented as a link to Islam.
Does this look familiar?
Oh, was that neck. A knot? My neck. My neck's exposed. This, along with a jail.
If the bow tie don't fit.
You must bow tie.
Blame Pee-wee. Blame Black Pee-wee.
That was some kind of Drake joke. I don't know.
He is Black Pee-wee.
Okay, so the bow tie makes them think, what's this guy's deal? Along with this claim, though, was a jailhouse informant speaking up, saying that Wallace's killer went by a name that sounded, quote, Middle Eastern, like Amir or Ashmir, and his real name might be Abraham or Kenny or Kiki. Also look at Keefe D, falls into that rough sound estimation. This Middle Eastern sounding name claim, I didn't plan on that rhyming, came in after Biggie was killed, but before David Mack was arrested. The informant also said that the killer was a former Southside Crip member and could have belonged to a security force connected to the Nation of Islam called the Fruits of Islam, whose members sported distinctive blue or white uniforms, caps, and bow ties.
The bow ties.
And Muhammad did belong to the Nation of Islam, but he was brokering loans in Southern California since 1984, so there was no gang affiliations to him.
That can be our catchphrase. Brokering loans in Southern California since 1964.
1984.
1984. My favorite year for dictators.
Is that a reference to me?
You were born out of distress and repression.
You're born in Fahrenheit 451. So the police suspected Muhammad anyways, especially since about a month after his visit, they obtained a driver's license photo and it resembled one of the two composite sketches of the killer. Detectives began looking into Muhammad, but the many addresses that he listed in his background check were either false or led to post offices. The LA Times were also unsuccessful in tracking him through public records and former friends. The overall theory was that Mack and Knight hired Amir Muhammad to take Biggie out for them. But other than the Nation of Islam thing and knowing David Mack, there really wasn't anything to go on. They were just sort of stumped on whether he was a real suspect or not. So the day after the LA Times published an article, the LAPD spokesman said it was accurate. But a week later, detectives told a lawyer representing Muhammad that his client was not a suspect. So they didn't know where to stand on this guy. The lawyer said detectives initially indicated they wanted to interview Muhammad, but never followed through on that. So by 2000, in the year 2000, NBC is already knocking on the door. Muhammad was cleared by the LAPD for the killing. He was quoted in an interview as saying, "I'm not a murderer, I'm a mortgage broker."
And they replied with, "What's the difference?" And the jury stood up and clapped.
In 2005, Muhammad was arrested by investigators on unrelated perjury charges connected to the possession of 4 false identifications. Odd, because in 2011, a man named Clayton Hill, who used to be a member of Islam, came forward to hiphopdx.com and claimed to be an accessory to the murder of Biggie, and the killer went by the name Dawood Muhammad. Hill says that he was acting under orders from the powers that be at the Muhammad Mosque 15 in Atlanta. He was told to go to the Greyhound station and collect something from him, and he would just hand it over. Hill met a man at the Greyhound station from Los Angeles who called himself Dawood Muhammad, handed over a 9mm or a .40 caliber, he doesn't remember, and said it was used to kill Biggie. It was wrapped in a white undershirt. When shown a picture of Amir Muhammad to see if it was the person that they're going for, he responded, "I have looked at the pics, and although I cannot conclusively with any absolute certainty because that was 14 years ago, Amir Muhammad looks like the person who used the name Dawood."
So it sounds like he does have some certainty, and he can say.
But because he couldn't positively ID the killer, nothing really came for that. Here's two things that make me not want to listen to Clayton Hill. First, in 2011, by the time that he did this interview, he was serving time for conspiracy to defraud the United States and identity theft. Second, all these juicy details were made to be published in a book he was writing, Diary of an Ex-Terrorist. Everyone on their book deals.
Sirhan has a book coming out, by the way. I forgot to mention.
It's called Sirhan.
By my own Sirhan.
So, what's the deal with this informant and the Wallace family suing the city of LA and the LAPD? Well, a jailhouse informant named Wayman Anderson, Wayman like Raymond but with a W, like a baby saying it.
His parents were babies, babies having babies, and they named him Wayman. Everybody loves Wayman.
Wayman Anderson was claiming that he had inside knowledge about the killer of Biggie, and he was the one who linked David Mack, Suge Knight, and the Middle Eastern man all together. The person he heard it from was cellmate Rafael Perez, newly incarcerated at the time, who also threatened Anderson, saying that he'd kill him if he found out he was speaking to any detectives about the killing.
You're gonna kill me. I want to do you in. But I'm Wayman. You ain't no Wayman. Everybody loves Wayman. Don't kill me. Turn off the light. Don't turn off the light.
When the Wallace family heard this, they filed a civil suit against the city of LA and the LAPD for covering up the murder of Biggie. In July of 2005, U.S. District Judge Florence Marie Cooper declared a mistrial, ruling that a detective had hidden transcripts of an interview with a police informant alleging LAPD involvement in the murder. The detective, Stephen Katz, said he had overlooked the transcript in a desk drawer.
Right.
Quality stuff.
Well, I mean, who checks their desk drawers?
The transcripts quote a jailhouse informant as saying that Rafael Perez was involved in the killings as well. But before the trial began in 2005, Mack and Muhammad were dropped as defendants when the jailhouse informant admitted that he made it up. Anderson, a former R&B singer, was serving life in prison for a 1993 arson murder. He recanted his statement, saying that it was part of a scam that two other convicts came up with to squeeze a huge settlement out of the city. He went on to accuse the Wallace family and their lawyers of participating in this scheme and offering him money for a false testimony if they pointed a finger at the LAPD. He said, "It was a lie. I'm ashamed of it. I did what I had to do to survive." And then he recanted his recanted statement. He testified that he lied about the deposition because he had received death threats from a rap producer that were passed on to him by former LA Times reporter Chuck Phillips, who denied the allegations, of course, because they sound crazy.
I don't know what to believe in.
I don't know what his book is going to be called, but I'm going to read it.
I'm still trying to remember who Poochie is.
The FBI around this time also closed their investigation into Biggie's death, as there was no basis for prosecution after looking into the Knight Muhammad Mack thing for over a year. Nothing to go on. Around this time, April of 2007, is when Chief Bratton of the LAPD launched a task force to find the culprit, which is when Greg Kadings comes in and does his investigations into Poochie.
The People versus Poochie.
People versus Poochie. And around this time is when she files a second wrongful death lawsuit against the city of LA. The suit named LAPD officers in the center of the investigation Rafael Perez and Nino Durden, who we also mentioned in the backup episode. Some think that Perez was more involved in the killing than many think, as he was on duty the night of the assassination, and being Officer Perez, that's what you do for fun, is kill people. But that case
load up the old German armor-piercing bullets and head down to the car museum.
But that case was dismissed in December of that year. In May of 2008, Judge Cooper once again reinstated the lawsuit, but both sides agreed to dismiss the case in April of 2010. Captain Jim Jones said, "Drink the Kool-Aid," and everyone's like, "What's it taste like?" He's like, "Love." Captain Jim Tetro, who leads the LAPD's robbery homicide division, called the allegations ridiculous and said, "If they were LAPD cops, so be it. Like, we haven't taken hits before." Okay, right. No point of bragging, all right? Yeah, we've taken hits before.
We already took out the Kennedys. Come on.
So what does all this mean? All roads lead, in my opinion, to Suge Knight. David Mack or not, Suge Knight. Yeah. Suge Knight. Yeah. The Freedom of Information Act has allowed for the release of a 359-page FBI file to be released.
It's going to get diabetes from all this Suge in this story.
359-page FBI file has been released, which is the internet had poured over and allowed me to do most of the research. This is one of those cases where we want to say it's unsolved, but all the signs point to a certain direction. But instead of a clear shot, we have this tangled mess of guilty parties. It all comes down to who fired the gun on Fairfax and Wilshire on March 9th. We may never know who drove that dark Impala that night. no one's going to come forward and say, yeah, it was me. But there's so many people who are like clearly involved in this.
But then at the same time, like, what does it matter? You know, like what's done is done, and things are ruined.
It matters to some people. Like I imagine to the family.
To the families, yeah. But it seems like all assassinations, like who knows? Like, we'll never know. There's always conspiracy and subterfuge and conspiracy.
Especially because not that there isn't mystery tangled up in this one, but everybody who's involved is either dead or in jail already. Like they're already serving time for something else. Like they might not be suffering for their crimes, but they're taking a hit. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this one's particularly frustrating.
Is there any mention of a pug-nosed blonde girl in a polka dot dress?
Only that she owned a Impala factory. Why?
That only produced black Impalas, and she also, for a hobby, would knit bow ties. Well, what's the big deal? I wasn't expecting there to be no definitive answer to either of these stories. We just gave you 2 acts of a 3-act play.
It's up to you to go solve it.
Choose your own adventure, because we don't have any answers.
Scary stuff all happening on Wilshire.